There's a lot of companies that start off this process with asking about what it means for them to form a drone program. And that's not always the right question to be asking. Typically, a better question to ask at the beginning of that process is, what kind of business objectives am I trying to solve?
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 148. What could we see happening in the worldwide drone industry? Fortunately, we don't need a crystal ball, because today's guest is going to give us some key insights. Jeremiah Karpowicz is the Executive Editor for Commercial UAV News. He has created articles, videos, newsletters, ebooks, and more for various communities as a contributor and editor. He is also the author of a number of industry-specific reports that feature exclusive insights and information on how drones are being used in various markets. One of those reports is called the Commercial Drone Predictions for 2018, which makes 8 bold predictions for the North American and European drone markets. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Jeremiah will give us some insights into those predictions, and he'll update us on the plans for the 2018 Commercial UAV Expos in Europe and the United States. But before we hear from Jeremiah, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign on Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the costs of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to patreon.com/drone radio show to join the team. Now let's learn what's in store for the worldwide drone industry with Jeremiah Karpowicz. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Jeremiah to introduce himself.
My name is Jeremiah Karpowicz. I'm the Executive Editor for Commercial UAV News, which is the online component of the Commercial UAV Expo. And that's 2 expos now. There's Commercial UAV Expo Americas and Commercial UAV Expo Europe.
Jeremiah, would you call yourself an analyst or a writer?
I consider myself more of a journalist or someone who's able to kind of provide coverage of the space. I certainly don't go as in-depth as somebody like Colin Snow or even Chris Carodi or Mike Blades. I think those guys are very firmly and correctly in the analyst space, but as somebody who tries to pull together and get a sense of what's happening and communicate that to our audience, which is very much focused on how commercial UAV technology is being utilized right now and what makes sense. And more so lately is about being able to introduce or get a better understanding of what that will mean in the future from a business perspective and from a safety and securities perspective.
You recently published a report called Commercial Drone Predictions for 2018. Now, before we get into the predictions, what stands out most when you look back to last year?
2017 was about data in every way, shape, and form. I can't tell you how many times I heard the phrase, it's not the drone, it's the data. And that was something that was backed up by Brian Krasanich's speech of data being the new oil, and even put together kind of a supplementary piece to that on the site about what role drones can play in that kind of data infrastructure. In terms of those kind of high-level takeaways from the year, it really is about how many different things can be done with the data, though, in terms of automation, in terms of machine learning, in terms of AI, and a lot of that stuff is being explored in a lot of different ways, and we're seeing the ramifications of that, and it's only going to get even bigger and more powerful.
So if I hear you correctly, at one time, it was all about the drone, and last year, it was no longer about the drone, it was about the data. And now this year, it's about what you can do with the data.
I think so. And, it backs up something that Chris Anderson from 3DR has talked about in terms of the drone, getting them into the door. But from there, it's about what problem are you trying to solve? What are you actually trying to do? And that's just been being able to have that conversation in so many different ways, shapes, and forms is what's really exciting and important, because so many people want to do so many different things. And what kind of bottom line value is going to be provided to a company is going to mean something different in so many different contexts. And even being able to define what safety can mean to an organization, because I was just talking to Hector Venus over at San Diego Gas and Electric, and to them, safety safety means not exposing their inspectors to snakes that are out that they'd otherwise have to deal with. And in the summertime, when those things are out, that presents a real hazard. And that kind of safety implication isn't going to be the same for a utility company that's up in the Northeast. But being able to define that and break that down is what people are going through. And it's all about being able to gather specific insights related to these tangible things.
Rather than separating the U.S. from the European market, this year's report takes on a global perspective. Were you looking for commonalities between the two markets from the start? Or did that happen to emerge after the research?
No, it definitely was a conscious decision to be able to put together some of these insights that were going to be relevant to both continents. Because at first, and like last year, I actually did different reports. One was focused on the U.S. and the other one was Europe specific. But in looking to do the same thing this year, saw just a lot of crossover and a lot of concepts that are specifically relevant for commercial users throughout the world. Something like high altitude, long endurance segment of that coming on in a big way this year. That's something that's just as relevant for professionals in North America as it is for folks in Europe. A company like Airbus Aerial being able to pull back and not make the focus a specific type of hardware, but instead about the data that's pulled from wherever, whether it is a drone or whether it is a helicopter or whether it is something that's all up in the stratosphere, being able to utilize that data in whatever way makes sense to complete your business objective is something that's super relevant to everyone across the world.
What stands out to you as something that's really noteworthy?
The most noteworthy one was something that Karpowicz from Drone Industry Insights talked about, and that's the role of counter-drone technology and just how big that already is and it's going to become throughout this year and beyond. And, with counter-drone technology, it's not just about awareness. I mean, that's the big part of it, and in a lot of ways, it's the focus of it for a lot of companies because it's not really legal to use some of this technology to go up and take down a drone, but being able to have a better understanding of what's in your airspace and what kind of vulnerabilities you're exposed to if you're not considering some counter-drone measures is something that's come on in a big way, and it's only going to get even bigger.
Has there been any discussions of how large that sector could be? I mean, on the surface, it seems that it could almost be as large as any of the other major sectors in the industry.
There's certainly that talk, and some of that falls into the concept of the folks that are insuring drones are going to be the ones with the best future potential. And the same thing with the counter drone space of it's not so much about what the drone technology itself is doing, but having that awareness of it. So the potential is there, and it's something people are talking about.
Are we going to see anything innovative or cutting edge?
The biggest thing that's going to come out of that space is really about regulation and how much people are going to be able to do in terms of whether it's just going to be that awareness and then they have to take the measures on their end, or whether it's something that they can actively be part of. Not suggesting that there's going to be a push to make it legal so that you can take down drones, but just that question of how much awareness you can have and what that means for you and the approach that you can take with what's happening in your airspace is going to be the bigger development in that area.
A lot of people may not want to talk about that, but I'm sure law enforcement and local and state governments would like to have that conversation before it's too late. At least some sort of policy guidance on how far they can go to protect a major asset or a critical facility.
Exactly. And that plays into the different layers we're talking about here as well, because in certain governments and in certain jurisdictions, some folks in those capacities have more leeway to take active measures than a private company would. And how much is going to be allowed or isn't going to be allowed is something that's those debates and arguments are happening right now.
So what else struck you in terms of this year's report?
Some of what's coming together with the UTM initiatives this year, I think, is going to be critical. And, honestly, we could have said that last year as well. But, that concept of building on what's come before is happening in this space. And it's happening in such a real and tangible way and so quickly. There's other industries that The reason we have the internet today is because it's been built on the infrastructure that came in the decades before, but so much of that is coming together right before our eyes. And what's happening with the 50-mile UTM corridor out in New York is really exciting, and how that plays together with some of the initiatives that are happening in Europe is just really great to see. And it's happening both in terms of those folks actively collaborating with each other, and there's also things that they're pushing together just that are region or country specific. So, those developments are really key.
Who are some of the key players or entities that are actively involved in UTM?
NASA's the big one. They've been pushing through, and obviously PK from NASA is basically a rock star in this space and one of the sharper guys out there. So NASA is front and center. But Griffin Sensors out of New York is also big in this space. New Air is doing some stuff there out in New York. Hoot Gibson just took over there. So those are just a few of the folks that are pushing that forward.
In the report, high-altitude, long-endurance systems are called out as one of the trends to look for in 2018. What's that all about?
The HAIL segment is something that's been developed for a while. AeroVironment is somebody that's taken the lead there, and a lot of it took place primarily or even exclusively in the military context, and it's something that came along there, but we're just starting to see how the technology that's been developed in that space can and will be relevant in a commercial application. And like I said, companies like AeroVironment and even Alta Devices, who Rich was quoted in the piece, they have their eyes on it, and it's something that's coming on in a big way.
So basically, these systems are designed to keep sensors in the air longer.
Exactly. It obviously comes up in how many different conversations you have with folks, is that issues of how much can or can't be accomplished if a drone is only up in the air from anywhere from 25 minutes to an hour. But with these high altitude, long endurance devices, we're talking about a piece of hardware that can be in the air for a month or 3 months and have a much wider scope of an area. So being able to have that kind of capability is really going to open doors. I mean, it's almost a midway point between the info that you can gather from a drone versus a satellite. And then, of course, helicopters are in there as well. So it just goes back to that concept of adding another tool to the toolkit that's going to be able to solve the specific problem that's going to give you the kind of business insight that you need.
Automation has really risen to the top in recent months. What do you see happening in this area?
The automation piece is interesting because for me, it's always been a concept of what does the technology allow us to do versus what will regulation allow us to do. And in so many places, regulation states that there needs to be a pilot in command. So just pressing that easy drone button can be more of a regulatory issue than it is a technology. The technology piece in, companies like Aerobotics has their drone in a box, and that's what was quoted in the piece as well. And, the automation that he's really talking about there is about something that's for the most part there, but what he's pushing through there is about companies seeing that capability is not only ready on a technical level, but that the ability to sort through the regulation is in front of folks. There's going to be different circumstances in different countries where that's more difficult and less difficult, but it's there to have an impact. We have these kind of beyond visual line of sight capabilities, but the regulation for that is nowhere near sorted out in America or across Europe. There's been some stuff done in France and a few other countries in Europe and even on Africa to showcase that capability, but that kind of usage isn't prevalent because the regulatory piece hasn't been sorted through.
As the report highlights, the drone industry is really a dynamic market. How are companies adapting to the opportunities?
So companies of all different types and sizes have been trying to figure out what it means for them to adopt drone technology in an effective way for a long time now. Typically, that meant either hiring a service provider or doing something like forming a tiger team, where you have a couple individuals who explore what it means to create efficiencies with the technology and then lay out how that can be scaled across an entire organization. Now, recently, with developments like the American Rail Engineers acquiring a commercial drone company, we see that there's another answer to this question, but all of it really comes down to the specifics of where and how drone technology is going to be able to create value for that company. And the answer to that always is dependent on a lot of different specifics that have to be considered in detail. There's a lot of companies that start off this process with asking about what it means for them to form a drone program. And that's not always the right question to be asking. Typically, a better question to ask at the beginning of that process is, what kind of business objectives am I trying to enable here? What kind of business challenges am I trying to solve? Am I using drones to make something faster, cheaper, or safer? Are there specific efficiencies that I can quantify? And on the other side of that, for service providers, are they able to address those things when they come up? Do they lead off conversations with the specifics of where and how they can create these efficiencies? And I know I'm speaking in generalities when I say things like efficiencies and what it means to create value, but that those things really do mean something different to different organizations. For some companies, just saving 40 seconds off a given task could represent a savings of many thousands of dollars. For other organizations, that kind of time savings would have to be something that is 15 minutes or more. For other organizations, they're thinking more in terms of safety, and the value of the drone is that instead of sending a human being into a potentially dangerous situation, you can send the drone. And quantifying that is something that happens beyond the bottom line. And that's where we can really talk about something like value.
When you look at the European and North American markets, is there a lot of similarity in the trends, or are certain trends more important in the North American market versus Europe?
The biggest distinctions really comes back to regulation, because in some ways Europe was ahead of the United States before the United States got Part 107, because even throughout Europe, regulation there is country by country, but even going that way from a commercial standpoint, for the most part, you could do a bit more there than you could here with the Section 333. But with Part 107, that almost kind of flipped. And now there's talk in Europe about what's going to come together in 2019 for a single set of comprehensive rules. And there's a lot of talk between EASA and Cesar about making that happen. And there's a lot of folks working through that right now.
Now, there's a Commercial UAV Expo in Europe this spring and another expo in the fall in the United States. How do you prepare for the two shows, given that they're in different markets?
For us, it always starts with the professionals that are actually using this technology and want to be using this technology. And those are folks that are working in construction, that are working in utilities, that are working in surveying and mapping, these very drilled in industrial uses of the technology, and kind of almost work back from there in terms of what somebody's doing, what they want to be doing, and really that process of how drone technology is making a business impact. And it's really interesting to see how many different people have different processes associated with that, different measurables associated with that. And of course, those vary from industry to industry, from organization to organization, and from country to country. But it all comes back together, though, in terms of the end of that process, what it looks like of defining value. And for some people, that's about this bottom line. We used a drone, which represented this much less cost for a given task, or because we kept this many people out of doing this kind of hazardous situation, whether they're quantifying that value or not in terms of dollars. Being able to lay out how it's making a difference is just an essential element of both expos.
And am I correct that each expo has a board of industry professionals that helps in developing the agenda?
Exactly. We have separate advisory boards for both Commercial UAV Expo Europe and Commercial UAV Expo Americas. And the folks that we pull on there are from all over all different industries and from all different sides of those industries. As I said, they're the ones out there either using it or supplying the technology and really have that better insight and understanding around the issues that needs to be talked about and addressed when people come together in these face-to-face events.
What are the dates for the European Expo?
So the Commercial UAV Europe is coming up April 10th to 12th at the RAI in Amsterdam.
Do you have any information on the keynote speakers or the key topics for the expo?
Yeah, we've announced our three keynotes for the event. Jesse Kallman from Airbus Aerial is going to be talking about the future of aerial data. Kai Wakowitz from Drone Industry Insights is going to be giving keynote that addresses the drone market as a whole. It's called Securing the Digital Transformation. And then Lorenz Meyer from PX4 is going to be talking about drones and the connected ecosystem. So you can kind of see the different angles for each of those. Jesse is very much from that business side and that data side and what's actually happening in the space in terms of what people are doing and how they're using this info. Kai is going to talk about the markets and some kind of wider range implications of what's going on. And then Lorenz is going to be looking at that future and giving folks an understanding of what's happening right now, but then how that impacts the future.
The UAV Expo America will be held in the fall. What can we look forward to?
What's really exciting about this year's edition, which really is different from any other edition of the show, is that it's going to be incorporating Drone World Expo, which Diversified Communications, the parent company, acquired last year. That's allowed us to pull in Gretchen West and Lisa Ellman to serve as co-chairs of our advisory board. And the advisory board for Commercial UAV Americas was just announced a few weeks ago. And it's really a great list of industry leaders across the board. And we're really looking forward to being able to showcase how Drone World Expo previously has done a great job of that forward looking of where things are headed in the space and being able to talk about concepts like urban air mobility. And for the most part, those sort of things haven't been part of Commercial UAV Expo. And Lisa and Gretchen have done an amazing job putting together the program for Drone World Expo previously, and being able to connect with them and bring that as an added element to the expo, to our expo this year, is something I'm personally really looking forward to.
You've been with the UAV Expo for almost 3 years. How would you describe that experience?
It's really interesting to see just how fast it's developed. I remember first got involved in the space, folks were just trying to get their head around what they could be doing with the drone or what they should be doing with the drone. And now I'm writing articles about what the scalability of the entire business model can look like for entire organizations and entire markets. So just being able to, in some ways, I know I'm not the first person to mention it, but it's like being around for the beginning of the internet when that was coming together. But this technology feels like it's coming together in a much quicker way, and it's exciting to see and be part of in whatever limited or involved way I can be.
Based on what you've learned, what insights would you offer to commercial drone operators or entrepreneurs to be successful?
Yeah, for folks starting a business, it's going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be tough, but you're going to have to really focus on what you can do and who you can help and what kind of problems you can solve. I'm sure you've heard about there's ads on Craigslist of I'll fly a drone for $50 or whatever. And there's service companies that have some stuff listed of being able to come out and fly drones for you. So the competition at that level is intense. So being able to be as specific as you can to a professional and talk through what kind of problems you can solve for them is going to make the difference.
What type of person do you think would get the most value out of either of the shows?
The type of person that is going to get the value out of it and the type of person we really appeal to are folks that are either using the technology in a commercial application or want to be using the technology to impact their business or bottom line. These are folks that are either considering what it would mean for them to start a drone program or just want to know what kind of questions they should be asking and answering as they figure that out, or that they think that this technology represents something that can make a difference to them. Come into the expo and connecting with other professionals that are asking those same kind of questions and listening to presentations from folks that are talking through what their process looked like is really invaluable, just because it provides a perspective that you can't get just by reading through materials that lay out what the technology might mean.
Is there anything that we missed about the report or about the expos that we should talk about?
I've talked in the past about the kind of value and return that drones can represent and that is out there and that different organizations have seen at different levels. And it's there and it's real. And that still is true as it ever was. One thing that's come on in a big way that I've seen recently is that companies or even individuals, if they see that potential, acting on it in whatever means makes sense for them, maybe and experimenting. And maybe that means looking into the logistics of starting a drone program. Maybe that means making sure you're set with regulation and buying a Spark and testing things out. Maybe that means hiring somebody off a company like Dronebase or something like that. but the potential to experiment and get a better understanding of what the technology can mean to you as both an individual on a process level and as an organization in a bigger picture sense is all right there. I mean, that's something I know you've seen, Randy, just in terms of how many different folks you've talked to that use this technology in ways you wouldn't have ever even envisioned. But being able to experiment and actually use it has opened doors that they didn't even think were there.
And you're right. I've been amazed at all of the things people are doing with drones and the technology. There may be challenges in creating a business, but there's no shortage of experimentation. And sometimes that experimentation can lead to something of real value.
Exactly. That concept of creating value means something different to different people. We were just talking about when I got started in the space, so much of it was about ROI. Where's the ROI? Where's the return here? And, obviously costs and those kind of bottom line realities are going to be a big factor in any sort of adoption consideration. But I've seen that kind of expand to consider what value safety can mean, but it means defining that. Just saying drones are going to represent something that's safer, or it's going to be a safer approach, oftentimes isn't enough. What that safety piece means to a construction company is different than what that safety piece means to somebody working in agriculture. And being able to work through and define that is where that value is, and what the value means is going to be different. And getting those answers is what's happening right now, and that's really one of the most exciting parts of being in the space, is seeing how different people define value. Because sure, that ROI piece and that using a drone represents X amount of dollars saved over using a helicopter or sending a crew out there. That's fine, and that's great, but exploring what different values mean is something that's happening and something that's great to see.
That's it for episode 148 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Jeremiah Karpowicz of the Commercial UAV News. I want to thank Jeremiah for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about the Commercial UAV News or the Expos, or just want to connect with Jeremiah, check out the webpage at expouav.com. You can also download a copy of the report Commercial Drone Predictions for 2018 from this same site. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the costs of production. To donate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.